Hello, my name is Grant Elder. I'm author of the book Wiki versus NWO, where NWO stands for New World Order, as well as this accompanying website. I'd like to take a couple minutes and explain to you the origin of the book and how it relates to this website. So, my background is I have an undergraduate degree in political science from Concordia University, and then I graduated from McGill University in management accounting and became a management consulting for large enterprises across North America. And through my travels, I was always wondering why it was that these amazing practices for managing large organizations weren't being applied in government. Today we have the capacity to build these amazing cars, power plants, these smartphones which require thousands and thousands of people working in unison to develop these products. They're free, which can provide so much value to our society. Yet here I am in my late 40s, and the problems that were described to me politically as a child still remain. Issues with the environment, social tensions, the deficits, all of this stuff, nothing has been corrected. Yet we have, as a species, the capacity to manage these incredibly complex organizations today, be it planes flying across the continents at high speeds, delivering millions of passengers per year on time. So I thought to myself, why wouldn't I write a book taking from the context that we take our political system and we scrap it and we say, let's start from the very beginning and how do we govern ourselves with what we have now learned managing these large corporations and putting these best practices into place. And as I was drafting the book, basically came to the realization that essentially nobody will ever read it because people, by the time they get home, men and women, after their day's work and dealing with their children, are exhausted. They just want to have a break. They turn on the boob tube and watch whatever's put in front of them to get a laugh and de-stress before they start the whole thing over again the next day. And I don't think people realize the kind of danger we're getting into as we move along in our society, getting access to greater and greater amounts of energy and having a larger imprint on our environment. So I was working through various industries across the United States, and I was director of finance at one point in my career at Air Transat, and that's at the time when 9/11 occurred. And when it occurred, we immediately went into emergency mode. We had to reduce our costs drastically. The markets fell by over 40% overnight, and we started executing on a plan. And as we went through that, it was rather exhausting. And at the end of a couple of years, I decided to go back to consulting. I'd never given another thought to 9/11 and what happened that day, and believing what I saw on TV and what our governments were reporting. And we were down in Jersey, and I had a contract at a couple of steel plants down there. And my wife came back from New York. She'd gone for the day downtown to Wall Street area. And it happened to be the anniversary of 9/11. When she came in, she said, Grant, there's tons of people protesting. They have these black and white T-shirts that say 9/11 Truth on them. And there's pamphlets being handed out saying that it was an inside job. The government was involved. And we thought, well, that'll be on the news. And if 12 people show up at an abortion clinic, it's on the evening news. So we turned on CNN and Fox and CBC and CBS and NBC. There was zero coverage. And my wife was reacting pretty strongly to that, saying, well, this makes absolutely no sense. How could this be going on in downtown New York and there's zero coverage? So that's when we kind of started thinking that there's something basically fundamentally wrong in our world. In fact, that there was no coverage of this event that's so significant and was still very current at the time. But back to work like everyone else the next day, putting on 60, 70 hours a week. The years passed on, and then I was between mandates at one point, and I received a PowerPoint presentation through email from a friend, and it was by a group called Loose Change, where they once again came back and said, here's evidence that 9/11 was an inside job, talking about the physics of it. So I was watching the news at one point, and this was just when the markets were heading down. There was basically a crash, and George Bush came on TV and said, nobody could have predicted that the markets would crash like this. And at the time, I thought, well, that's funny. I'm a bit of a finance junkie, and I have 5 books on my shelf over here that all predict that the housing market's in a bubble and that the Fed is messing with the monetary supply. And this guy has access to billions of dollars of resources, the top minds in the world, and he couldn't see it coming. And it struck me as how that was the same way he announced that America had been attacked and that nobody could, foresee that planes would be run into buildings. So I knew right there he was lying, so I decided to dig into that a little further, and I started watching some documentaries. And I saw one where there was a Nobel Prize winner, Dario Fo. This was a man who was recognized as one of the greatest minds. I think he won his Nobel Prize at the same time as Stephen Hawking. And he disappeared off the radar once he made those pronouncements. And here he is showing, with very basic common sense, that what the government was saying made no sense whatsoever. So that set me down on a path where I started digging, and once you realize that the government could do such a thing and the amount of resources required to execute such a plan and the implications of the media and so forth, I realized that was very important in terms of understanding how our world actually works, how we are actually governed, and why many of the issues that were issues when I was a child still aren't fixed. So I decided to cover that in the first part of the book. The book is covered in 2 large segments, about 600 pages that go through 14 chapters from 9/11 at the very beginning, through how the media works, wars, how they're initiated, the monetary system, and so forth, right through to the last chapter, chapter 14, which is about the New World Order. Because if you try and approach someone like myself who is highly educated in the Western system, and you get propaganda through your television channel every night, it's very hard to change your belief system. It's like in the Middle Ages when the church was running everything, and Galileo comes out and says, you know what, the evidence says the world, she's not flat, she's around, and we're not the center of the universe either. See, at that time, the understanding of the people was that their priests, who talked to the bishops, who talked to the Pope, talked to God. That's what they were told, that the Pope had a direct connection to God. So if they were saying that the world was flat and human beings are the center of the universe, and somebody proved otherwise, then that means you'd have to push into question the whole command and control structure that was in place. So people obviously didn't want to change their minds very quickly, and certainly the power structure in the day didn't want that known, because the scam was up if that was the case. So they obviously incarcerated Galileo for a while. And that's how it works. And history repeats itself. And what I'm trying to show people in the first part of the book is that we're in the exact same predicament. We've been sold a bill of goods of how our monetary system works and how decisions are made, and this belief that we live in a democracy and so forth. Meanwhile, the United States, most of the people didn't want to go into Iraq, yet the country did, and they keep finding themselves in wars. And the same thing with all the Western nations. So that sets up the common understanding for everyone. You go through the first 14 chapters, and it changes your belief system, your paradigm. And then in part 2 of the book is where I take the management control system, the best practices we've learned in large industries, and say, okay, let's start from scratch, and what would our policies look like, and how do we govern our society? And the wiki part comes in where you take the current technology that we have available, and we overlay it, giving it another dimension to the best practices, because we can now have the systems to facilitate it. We have representative democracy because when it came into play, we couldn't have everybody voting because the means of communication across a continent weren't really there. So we had to have people point themselves to a General Assembly and make decisions. But we have no reason to do that anymore. We can move towards a true democracy. But we need to understand as a group of people that maybe democracy isn't the total answer, that the notion of a republic and the decisions by law and protections of the people by law also has to be taken into consideration. I'm watching my child go on Amazon.com, and he's voting on a $1.99 Lego. He's looking at qualitative exchanges between people who bought this toy to understand if he truly wants it, and then he can purchase it, make a decision, and also vote on it and give comments for future buyers. And I think, well, if we can do that with a $1.99 Lego, why am I not able to vote on water in my area or any other laws that are being passed? So that's the objective of the book. It's to bring people to a common understanding and an understanding that there are solutions to the problems today. We just all have to get on the same page about it. So when we change our minds, when we want to change our belief system, it's a big deal. We're rewiring our brains, and it took me months when I first woke up to this stuff to actually come to realization. And as I wrote the book, I realized that other people can have the same challenges. I got to watch tons of documentaries, read tons of peer-reviewed papers, and so forth. So I designed a website to go with the book. As people read through the chapters, in each chapter if they're looking at money or UFOs or whatever it might be, they can come to this website, go into part 1, and each of the chapters are there on the left-hand side, and click on it, and then there will be all the supporting documentation and documentaries. Short videos or long videos, whatever they feel like getting into, to understand that it's just not my opinion, but there's a whole background of research here. It's 7 years worth of research behind it all. And it helps people move along in terms of their understanding. So that's the gist of the website. That's the purpose of it, and that's where we're taking it to in the next stage is part 2. There's a lot of the best practices that have to be developed on the website. They're all there in the book, but we put additional videos there. And then there will be another accompanying website launched in 2015, which will be called the Social Governance System, where we will be looking at bringing solutions via open source software. That's going to be the next phase. So I hope you enjoy it. Hope you enjoy the ride, and thank you for watching. Have a nice day.